All right, we are live. I'm joined this fine evening by Northwest Line, who you may or may not know from the platform X. That's where I first encountered Northwest Line. Before we get going, I'm going to align the planets. Where's my mark?
I love how you are conflating time with the planets, which is 100% accurate.
I
It's
spent a
like,
long time on Amazon looking for an interesting timer.
well, I'll tell you what, I mean, if people want to know what time is, it's like, well, go outside. If you see the sun come up over here and then it goes down over there and all that, while you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for it to move across the sky, that's time. It's like the most simple and direct, response you can give. It's literally the motion of the heavenly bodies is where we have derived all time from. And then we developed our mechanical technology, specifically the clock. And the clocks were designed not so much just to keep time during the day, but also as an astronomical means of tracking the motion of the planets, the sun, the moon, so on and so forth. So clocks have always been very intimately intertwined with astrophysics and astronomy from the very first. I mean, you look at the sundial. I mean, how does the sundial work? It works via the sun moving across the sky, casting a shadow. I mean, so there is a very, very, very tight correlation in terms of looking at the planets, and tracking time. And so for me, if anybody asks me, what is time? I go, well, look up in the sky. If you see things moving across the sky, that's time right there. You can see it with your own eyes. It's not even abstract if you think about it. It's very deliberate. I mean, when the sun goes down, it's down. When it's dark, it's dark. There's no abstraction to it whatsoever. If you have your five senses, you can feel it. And especially this time of year where we live up in the Great Lakes, you
Mm-hmm.
just don't see it with your eyes, you feel it with your body. Because temperature this time of year will drop 20 to 30 degrees every night. We're looking to be in the low 30s tonight where I live. This is April. It is April, and we're looking at the low 30s. And I've always told everybody when you live in the Great Lakes, especially up north, winter doesn't really end until about April 15th, give or take. Some people will even say it doesn't really end until Mother's Day. There is, it,
Depends on the year.
it does. And yeah, you can definitely get snow or see snowflakes in mid April. It's not unusual at all. It's not going to, probably accumulate enough where you need to get the shovel out, but it's not unusual this time of year. And wild, wild temperature swings, violent weather, all the good things about living in the upper Midwest, weather that wants to kill you. And somehow we live through it through another year. It's really amazing. But oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's miraculous. I used to work at a summer camp in Lake Geneva, and we would have kids that would come from Chicago up, and they would see stars for the very first time. And there is nothing like watching kids who have never seen like the night sky see the night sky for the first time. I mean, just the wonder and imagination.
Well, speaking of technology, speaking of time, speaking of the stars, because that's the other thing that the ancients used to keep track of time and seasons. Of course, were the stars, and specifically the planets, the wandering stars. And a whole lot of technology, right from like the beginning of man, was dedicated to tracking stars, tracking planets, tracking the seasons. Look at Stonehenge, look at the pyramids. I mean, those things were made of stone because of the very predictability of the heavenly bodies. And, look at like the Mayans who understood it so well they could easily predict when an eclipse was going to occur. It's like just from observation and measurement. That's all it took. It's like, hey, this system is so regular and so predictable. We can actually predict. We can predict when seasons are going to occur. We can predict when eclipses are going to happen. We can predict all sorts of things based on the consistency of the heavenly bodies. And that's why, for me personally, I really think one of the things that's lacking in Christianity in general, regardless of which denomination you're is a basic understanding of the cosmology of Christianity in terms of where we fit in the cosmos. A lot of Christianity is really a lot more materialistic than it is cosmopolitan, in the true sense of the word cosmopolitan, in terms of being a citizen of the cosmos, not a citizen of Manhattan or San Francisco or Chicago or Milwaukee or Minneapolis, but being a citizen on this planet amongst the stars. And that's where technology took a bad turn. Thank you, Mr. Thomas Alva Edison, and your invention of that darn electric light, because when that became as common as dirt and as cheap as dirt too, honestly speaking, along with electricity, what was the first thing to go? All that glare from the city lights and the street lamps started blocking out our night sky. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. I mean, at best, I could see maybe the North Star, Orion, the Big Dipper, and that was about it. And it's, even though I'm in the distant suburbs, quite away from the city, where I'm at right now, I'm about 40 miles from the Chicago Loop, approximately speaking.
Yeah.
Is it any better seeing this night sky out here? Absolutely not. Probably, I'd have to go probably at least 100 miles from any city. Get far away from Chicago, from Rockford, from Peoria, from Madison, from the Quad Cities. Go find a cornfield way out there in the middle of nowhere. And thankfully, Illinois is full of nowhere.
And cornfields.
And cornfields. Well, you've been through central Illinois.
I have.
If you take something like I-55 or I-57, it's a lot of cornfields, a lot of cute little towns, and not a whole lot of else. I mean, Springfield is like a gigantic city, and it's part of Illinois, along with Bloomington, Normal, and whatnot. Those are like tremendous metropolitan, they're like Manhattan and Chicago, Milwaukee combined for the folks that live in that part of Illinois.
Yeah.
Because, it's amazing. I mean, back when I was a kid, we always said, the difference between Northern Illinois and Southern Illinois is Interstate 80. Once you cross over Interstate 80, you're in Southern Illinois from that point. Once you're north of Interstate 80, you're in Northern Illinois. And it's funny because if you look at the maps, it's like Interstate 80 is like just outside of Chicago. It just crosses through the southern suburbs of Chicago. Matter of fact, when I was a kid, I lived literally 1 block or 2 blocks away from Interstate 80. On the north side, of course. On the north side of I-80, the good side. But no, when you go south of I-80, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like the suburbs and the city just drops away very, very quickly. And you're back in the cornfields in no time. And it's like that too in Wisconsin. You think, between Chicago and Milwaukee, there's I-94. And as urban as it is, going through places like Kenosha, Racine, is it Oak? Gosh, I can't remember the name of Oak Creek and whatnot. There's a lot of empty space you go through. And if you were to exit I-94 and go west at any exit, man, you're just a few miles and boom, you're right in to rural Wisconsin and the cows and the corn and the soybeans in no time. But if you go off to the east off of I-94, in between I-94 and Lake Michigan, you see the continuous buildup of places like Racine, Kenosha. It's like that too in Northern Illinois. But Northern Illinois, there's a lot more. The suburbs of Chicago are much more massive. Much more massive. There's more people that live in suburban Chicago than actually live in Chicago. So, I mean, we're just a gigantic area, huge. And so, living in a very urban, very, um, well, how do I explain it? Very industrious. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Chicago is very much a product of the Industrial Revolution. No doubt about it. I mean, it went from a little tiny fort on Lake Michigan to producing steel and cars and trains and everything else in a shockingly small amount of time. And the reason why was, you have the southernmost point of Lake Michigan, which is the southernmost point of the Great Lakes. And back in those days, you had to have water if you wanted to transport freight. Overland freight, your oxen and your little oxen cart isn't going to haul a whole lot. Amazing what they did with that very primitive technology. But if you really wanted to carry freight by the ton, you had to have water access. Chicago had it thanks to being near the DuPage River, the Chicago River, and Lake Michigan. And there was a portage, even though the lakes don't connect directly, or I'm sorry, the rivers don't connect directly to the Mississippi River from Lake Michigan. The tributaries of the Mississippi come very close to Lake Michigan. And so you could just take your little boats and walk across a couple of paths and go from the Great Lakes, get to a tributary of the Mississippi, like the Fox River or the DuPage River, and boom, you're right down into the Mississippi River in no time. That combination was so key and so efficient and so effective back in those days that Chicago grew like gangbusters. I mean, just gigantic. Transportation, especially. And then beef, I mean, everything, every type of industry that you can think of in the United States, the products flew, or I should say, floated into Chicago. You had all the lumber, you had all the cattle, you had all the agriculture. And to a certain extent, it's still somewhat like that to this very day. But it's just amazing when you consider this country, especially the United States of America, and how when men are let loose to use their imaginations and their ability to use tools to solve problems, that things expand rapidly and they grow rapidly. And just because we have it as being human beings, we have this ability to think of, create, and build tools. The best tool making animal that has ever existed on planet Earth, bar none. I mean, other animals, you can see chimps and birds and even a dolphin or a sea animal using a tool, but nobody has the array and the kind and the variety that we do. I mean, one of the fun things about living in the Great Lakes is the amount of industry in this area is outrageous. And one of the industries nobody ever thinks of, but is hugely important, is that of mining. There are tremendous salt mines in and under. I mean, they're all 100% underground. You will never, if you drive around looking for a salt mine, you'll never see it. But there's huge caverns, even under the Great Lakes themselves, where there's this wonderful salt. Another thing, especially if you live in Wisconsin and Northern Illinois, is sand. You would think, who wants to mine sand? What good is that? Well, if you're fracking for oil, you need sand to open up those fissures in the oil drilling areas. And the sand of the Midwest is the absolute best sand in the world for fracking. And so there will be 100-car trains of little covered hoppers, and the entire train is nothing but sand that's going out to Canada or North Dakota or to whatever other oil field, taking that sand and being pumped at incredible pressures underground to frack those oil wells, to extract every last bit of oil they can get. Same with the gas wells as well. So, I mean, the way we use technology in Mother Earth here in the United States is unprecedented from anywhere else in the world. We have such imagination such incredible tools, such incredible ability to extract resources. It boggles the mind. And I mean, this is a commonly known fact amongst people, but not always expressed. The United States is the biggest oil producer on earth, far bigger than Saudi Arabia or Iran or any country in the Mideast, far bigger than Russia. We make the most oil. And if we just were to take off all restrictions and go, hey, drill a well wherever you want. Want to drill one outside of Santa Barbara or up in Alaska or wherever, go ahead and do it. I mean, we would be swimming in oil. Another thing that most people don't know, almost all of Illinois and Indiana is a coal field. These are states, pretty much anywhere where you want to dig, if you dig deep enough, you're going to strike a coal vein. Unbelievable amounts of coal. The problem, though, with our coal, especially here in Illinois, is unfortunately it has a lot of sulfur in it. And when you burn our coal, it literally smells like hell. It smells like sulfur. It smells like rotten eggs. And so even though we have tons of it, it never really took off in a major way, except for our own uses and our own power plants and our own steel mills. And those days are mostly behind us now. There might be a coal mine somewhere in Illinois still operating. I doubt it. The mines in Indiana didn't have that problem as badly. So I think there's still some coal strip mines in Indiana working. But again, I mean, this is stuff that you never think of about when you think about the Great Lakes or the Midwest, but very crucial in terms of technology and how we have developed as a country. Another fantastic example. And I'm so much of a nerd when it comes to this sort of stuff. I'm the kind of person who does this sort of thing. My kids and wife and I went up for a little vacation on the North Shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota. One of the most drop-dead beautiful places you can go in the Midwest. If you don't live in Minnesota, you would never know. It's not advertised. Oh, absolutely. And so, being a nerd growing up, the one thing I always knew about the North Shore in Duluth in that area is it's a major port. Ships come all the way from Europe all the way to Duluth to drop off and pick up cargo. They travel all the way through the St. Lawrence Seaway, all through the entire Great Lakes system to come to Duluth. Duluth is the furthest west in the United States you can get by an ocean-going ship. And why would they want to come to Duluth? Well, it's cheaper to ship anything by a ship. But there's another thing that's very interesting about Minnesota. Huge, gigantic deposits of iron ore. Iron ore is absolutely critical if you want to make anything out of steel. Cars, washing machines, buildings, bridges, you name it. Tanks, aircraft carriers, battleships, it all has to come from iron ore. Minnesota has the most plentiful iron ore mines in the United States. And they learned about these very early. All the rich people in the United States, the names like Rockefeller and whatnot. And they all went and bought up that land as fast as they could because they knew our steel mills needed that in order for the industrial age to really fly. And so the most important mining in all of the United States is northern Minnesota in a place they call the Iron Range. That's all northwest of Duluth in places like Hibbing, Minnesota, home to a guy named, oh gosh, what was his name? Robert? I forgot his last name. Oh, I think it was Robert Zimmerman. You ever heard of Robert Zimmerman?
Never.
You might know him by his stage name. His stage name was Bob Dylan. He grew up in Hibbing, Minnesota, which is the heart of the iron mines in the Iron Range. Some of them were the typical, drill a shaft, take the ore up and down via elevators and stuff like that. But most of it is open pit mining, and the pits are enormous. And there's places where you can go just outside of Hibbing where you can actually go and peer into the mines and see how gigantic these things are. So I went and took the family and I said, good, we're going into the mines. We're going to go see what an iron mine is and how massive these things are. Very interesting story. I won't go into it. We don't have time for it. How that became a very interesting aspect, especially of my daughter's life, interestingly enough, who has no interest in this stuff at all, but it turned out to work in her favor later on in life, knowing about this stuff and knowing about hibbing. But anyway, there you'd see the gigantic mining trucks. And these dump trucks that work in the mines are literally bigger than an apartment building. It's shocking when you see them. And when you see them, they have, for some odd reason, scales that are built into the trucks. And when you know something about trucking and transportation, overloading a truck is always a very bad thing. Mm-hmm. And so what they did with these mining trucks is they put a gigantic LED lit up with red letters scale or red numbers so you could see how much load you're putting in the mine trucks. And when those loaded mine trucks went by, you would constantly see numbers like 190 tons, 200 tons, 205 tons. That was just the amount of ore they were carrying, not the total weight of the truck, just the ore load. I mean, that's ridiculous. But those mines, supply the ore for every steel mill in the United States. And thereby, those mines were critical for the entire Industrial Revolution and critical, along with our coal mines, for the entire Industrial Revolution. Iron mines and coal mines and limestone, which you don't always think of as being a critical. It was like, limestone, what's the big deal? Well, if you want to make concrete and asphalt, you got to have that too. When I was a kid, I lived, once again, because I-80 literally goes through this, I lived by a place called Thornton Quarry. And yes, I-80 goes right through the center of the quarry. It's a giant white canyon. It's also known as 294, where you go through. It's kind of where 294 starts, if you know the Chicago area. But right there, it's actually still I-80, where it traverses Thornton Quarry. And all it is an endless pit of limestone that goes on forever. The only reason it doesn't go on forever is because, it's surrounded by the south suburbs, and they didn't want to kick people out of their homes to dig more limestone. They did do that in Minnesota, though. In Minnesota, wow. If your home was on a iron ore spot that they wanted to get at, they had no problems moving people, homes, and even entire towns out of the way to get at the iron ore. But Thornton Quarry, absolutely gigantic source of limestone. So you need limestone, iron ore, and coal to make steel. Those are the three big ingredients. And, living in the Great Lakes, I've been and seen most of those mines, with the exception of the coal mines. Those are way down south, what few are left open. Like I said, in southern Indiana particularly. Never seen a coal mine in person, but, definitely was educated into the importance of those mines when I was a kid and what they brought forth. So, technology and our love of machines goes back a very long time. Once the Industrial Revolution started, once the British figured out, hey, there's this thing called a steam engine. We could use this to get water out of our coal mines, because we're always having a problem with water getting into the mines, and we can't extract all the coal we want. So what did they do? Develop steam engines to run pumps to pump water out of the coal mines. And they go, this pump thing works really good. You know what? Maybe we could use these to run the shafts and make the elevators go up and down. And you know what? Maybe we could use these to haul the coal on little rail cars, because railways were actually invented when horses were hauling things. And they decided, hey, we'll just put our little coal cars on tracks, and It'll make it a lot easier for the horse to haul it. And then they said, hey,
Oh.
let's use steam engines. Let's see if the steam engines can haul these little coal cars any better than old Bessie or, the old mare. And sure enough, it worked great. So the steam engine was always very tightly correlated with mining. They were developed for the purpose of helping to extract minerals out of the earth. And then they found out, hey, once we extract the minerals, we can use them to move the minerals. And hence it just went off from there. They go, hey, if we can move freight, we can move people. So let's build some carriages and put them in behind the steam engine, and then we can move people around. And it just went and went and went. I mean, the connections of all these things is fascinating. There has been a continuous and nonstop revolution in tools and technology ever since the steam engine. If you want to put a finger on what technology, what machine really started things to get rolling, it has to be the steam engine, the boring little old steam engine. And here in 2026, as we're recording this, the Union Pacific Railroad, of all things, they took one of their old World War II steam engines called the Big Boy, which was in storage at a museum somewhere, rusting away. They pulled it out of the museum, spent 5 years rebuilding it, and in honor of the nation's 250th year of existence, they're using the steam engine as a publicity stunt, pulling a special little yellow passenger train all across the country. Right now, it's in Paul Vanderklay's backyard. They took it over Donner Pass and brought it to Sacramento. It's like, do you have any idea what the symbolic significance of Sacramento is in railroading, especially American railroading?
No. All I know is that whenever a train goes by, my wife counts all the boxcars.
Oh, does she? That's so
Yeah.
cool. I mean, I grew up around trains. And so we did the same thing all the time. But the reason Union Pacific brought the Big Boy to Sacramento is Sacramento is considered mile zero of the very first transcontinental railroad.
Oh.
There were two spots they started building out of. In the east, it was Omaha, and in the west, it was Sacramento. So right there in Paul Vanderklay's backyard is literally where the transcontinental railroad started. And they wanted to give Sacramento the first dibs on the Big Boy's turn because of that very fact. What's funny, though, is I don't know how familiar you are with Donner's Pass and why I got the name Donner.
Not at all.
Donner's Pass, California, when you look at it geographically, all those big, beautiful cities by the ocean, San Diego, LA, San Francisco, there is a spine of mountains that goes from Mexico all the way up into Canada. Some of them are called the Cascades. Some of them have different names like the Sierra Nevadas, all part of the same system. And these mountains are very formidable. They're not the Rockies. They're their own spine, and they're almost insurmountable. Well, back in the days of the Oregon Trail, obviously the Oregon Trail took people to Oregon, basically to Portland. And I think what was called the Willamette Valley, if I remember correctly. That's where it went. But like any major highway, even back in the days of horse and oxen drawn carriages and wagons, they had side roads. And one of the side roads was, hey, let's go to that place called San Francisco that the Spanish founded, that big city in Northern California, and let's go there instead of Portland. There was only one pass that allowed them through the mountains, and there's just one problem with that pass. Only passable in the spring and summer, and that's it. In the fall and winter, up to 30 or 40 feet of snow will come down and stay year round. And so one year, One family decided, hey, let's go and take Donner's Pass to get to California. But you know what? It's getting late in the year here. The snow's going to start falling. It's like, well, we can't spend 6 months waiting. We're going to run out of food and supplies. We got to get going. So they took the pass, which at that time was unnamed. And then guess what happened? Yep, it started snowing continuously, and there was no way they could advance. And so, as they ran out of food and ran out of the ability to move, something very sad happened. They had to start eating the dead bodies of the people who perished just to stay alive. Hence the Donner's Party, hence the name Donner's Pass. And that pass is still like that to this very day. Right now, Donner's Pass is darn near impassable on this particular day in April. And so even this gigantic monster Union Pacific big boy was rerouted because there's train tracks. I mean, the Transcontinental Railroad used Donner's Pass right away to build the first Transcontinental Railroad. And Union Pacific said, you know what? There's too much darn snow in this pass. We're not going to let the world's largest steam locomotive get stuck in it. So we're going to reroute it to a different route. So it's amazing, think that was like 150, 180 years ago. And I mean, to this day, Mother Nature still reigns supreme. For all of our technology, for all of our whiz-bangery, for all of our great and wonderful things, I mean, ground transport is still threatened by the snow of the Sierra Nevadas and Donner Pass becoming impassable to this very day. Oh, and by the way, another thing that goes through Donner's Pass, Interstate 80. The same Interstate 80 that I grew up next to in northern Illinois, that goes through Thornton Quarry. It's the same I-80 that goes through Omaha, that goes through Cheyenne, that goes through Salt Lake City, and then ends its journey as it passes through Donner's Pass in Sacramento and ends, I think, in San Francisco, if I remember correctly, once you cross the Oakland Bay Bridge. So, and the I-80 is definitely the busiest interstate in the United States. Unbelievable the amount of traffic and freight that carries. Another simple, easy bit of technology, not surprisingly, following the route of the Oregon Trail. And the Oregon Trail was the route followed by the Transcontinental Railroad. And then I-80 comes along and it follows both of those in order to allow better land traffic to cross the United States. So again, a lot of these things we think as separate little incidents in history, like the Oregon Trail, well, that becomes the Transcontinental. Then it becomes I-80. These things are connected and they advance in very interesting and unexpected ways through time. And so here we are. Now, let me ask you, my tweet, the reason for this video, what did you find interesting about that tweet? You don't have to go into it word for word, but.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you, it's almost like you're talking a map. Like your words are like mapping the map of America, and you see the world through these highways and railroad tracks, and you see all of these things as interconnected. And I don't know that many people my age, I'm 34, and probably even less the younger you get, see that interconnected world. In large part, I spend so much time on the internet in interconnected artificial worlds. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about how did we lose our grip on physical reality? And you had tweeted about sort of events in the middle of the last century, in the mid 1900s. And you made the comment that you've been studying that period for a long time, and you had some interesting thoughts. And I wonder if essentially the world that you still see for many people collapsed during the Great Wars, one and two, and then as the world was rebuilt out of that collapse, it's like a new world was built on top of the old world, and now there's new rules. And like the old world is still there and the highways on the train tracks, but it's almost a mystery to so many of us.
Well, that's for some odd reason, I have a lifelong fascination with maps as one of the oldest of all technologies. And I'm talking paper-based maps, which is what the only type of maps we had when I was a kid is, they were printed by Rand McNally and you folded them out and you could never
Yep.
pull them back together. And they still exist. I mean, you go to a
I have
visitor
one.
center in Wisconsin or Minnesota and you can still get one for free. And I have those. Whenever I go to a visitor center, I always pull one out. I love the old paper-based maps. But because of that love of maps, I can see everything as a map. I can see interconnectedness on all sorts of levels that normal people can't see. And yet, I do not ever make the mistake of mistaking the map for the territory. To me, there is a hard and fast divide between those two. The map is always going to be the symbolic representation no matter what. I don't care if it's electronic. I don't care if it's satellite. I don't care if it's paper-based. It's all symbol. Even the satellite, which is like, well, that's real. I mean, we're seeing real photos here. There's no symbolism in that. And yet, it's a viewpoint we will never have unless we're up in outer space or up in a high-flying airplane. That view of the satellite is abstract, as if we were drawing a map with pen and paper. So maps are critical. And that's why I like to speak about one of the lost arts of Christianity and of civilization itself is that of cosmology. Understanding our place in the universe, our place on Earth. It's funny because, there is that whole big to-do. Oh my gosh, Galileo says the sun is the center, not the Earth. Oh my goodness. The Catholic Church is so anti-science. La, 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 la. And, it's like, and the poor Catholic Church has never lived it down. Christianity has never lived it down. It's proof positive that we're all a bunch of just stupid apes who don't know anything because science is so much better, blah, blah, blah. And yet, we are observers on this earth. And from our perspective, everything literally does circle the earth. When I go outside, I don't see when Mr. Sun goes from horizon to horizon, I'm not seeing us spin around him. I'm seeing him going around us. Same thing with the moon, same thing with the stars. Why? Because it's a matter of perspective, and perspective also there is a tight correlation with perception. So, I mean, is it more scientific, technically speaking, to say we're heliocentric and the Earth is in the center? Sure, we can buy that, but so what? I mean, when I'm outside working, I don't see me going around the sun. I see sun going around me, literally going around me. So is it really all that bad? So going back, we're going to have to talk about a few other things. Galileo being one of them. Another one that is often mentioned by people much, much smarter than me, and I have grudgingly come to agree with them, is when Descartes did the mind-body separation. And, I think, therefore I am. That was another break in the cosmology where we have been fracturing ever since. Now, with that stuff in mind, let's move right into the 1960s. World War II happens. This is very, very important to understand. There are two dominant powers on Earth after World War II. Both of them are entirely products of Western civilization. 100% products of Western civilization. You have 5 countries: the United States, Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia. Now, technically, some of them may have been territories and not countries back in that day, but they are all countries now. What's the common thing about those 5 countries? Most of them, other than the UK, were completely untouched by the events of World War II. There were no invading armies, there was no bombers, there's none of that stuff. They evaded all of it. Only poor little England got some bombing and some V2 strikes. But even they, compared to France, compared to Belgium, compared to anywhere else on the continent, they hardly got anything. The only place that was more scot-free than them was Switzerland, for obvious reasons. So you have 5 English-speaking countries, the sum total of which all spoke English, and there was another interesting aspect of them. They were all dominantly Protestant, unashamedly Protestant. In particular, Episcopalian Anglican Protestant at that time. All 5 of them were. The one exception, of course, would be, French-speaking Canada, Quebec, and where the Catholic Church was still dominant. Other than that, everywhere else amongst those 5 nations, it was all Anglican, Episcopalian, with those other cute little Protestant sects like the Baptists, the Anabaptists, so on and so forth, playing a supporting role. So there's your one power center. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants dominating the world, putting Germany and Japan under their boots, making the greatest industrial powerhouse that has ever been seen in world history. More tanks, more guns, more ships than, the Romans would have been green with envy at our firepower and our capability to make war. And we have the second power center. We have Russia, dominated by another product of Western civilization called Marxism. So you got Karl Marx coming along with his answer to Christian civilization. And that's how you have to think of it. Marxism is not an economic system, really. Honestly, to be very boringly obvious here, it's like the worst economic system man has ever developed. It's horrible as an economic system. I won't go into all of the reason why, but really Marxism is better thought of as a competing religion to Christianity. And it, as it always is in almost every country where it becomes a norm, what else becomes a norm? Atheism. Government-directed, sponsored atheism is a product of communism. And oftentimes socialism too. Not so much socialism. They'll let, Christianity often have a pass, and sometimes there are such things as Christian socialists. But once you move into the communist realm, that's it. No Christians, no Jews, no Buddhists, no Muslims, no nothing. It's all atheism all the way from that point. We don't think as atheists as a competing religion, but when you abstract religion to a worldview, rather than, something that just deals with deities, it's very much a religious thing. And one might say it's a neo-pagan type of religion. So let's move forward. We got all that. And World War II's ended. We've got the 2 powers. We got the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and we have the communists made up mainly of Slavic Russians and ethnic Chinese. That's the 2 big powerhouses on planet Earth. And both of them want to institute their systems everywhere else on the planet. Hence, we have the Korean War, the Vietnam War. And there's some other interesting conflicts too. I won't comment about them right now, but critical for understanding the 60s. So we, as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation, are on top of the universe. We have more wealth, more education, more food, more of everything you could possibly want in a material sense than any civilization has ever had in all of history. with perhaps a couple of minor exceptions. Total freedom, no slavery, nothing coercive, really at all. I mean, it is about the closest we ever come to paradise on earth, especially amongst those 5 Protestant English-speaking countries. So what happens in the 1960s? People protest against it. So like for the first time in history, we have people protesting who have their stomachs full, who are incredibly well educated, who have more money and more opportunities than they know what to do with, and they're protesting it. Why? Nobody knows. They just decided we're going to protest. Oh, well, we're not having enough love. We're not, I mean, it's just, you look at it from a logical perspective and it makes no sense at all. But if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, it's like, oh boy, this is interesting. Some old gods are now rearing their heads. And for some odd reason, it becomes the mid-60s where all this comes to a head, where we have the greatest, most awesome civilization on earth all of a sudden being eaten away by itself. Great empires, great civilizations always die from the inside. It's never, ever the external conqueror that ends them. It's always eternal rot, internal rot. And so what causes it? Shockingly enough, riches, wealth, all that fun and happy stuff that we all want, that none of us would ever turn away. It turns out to be the cancer that eats our very souls. Now, what's interesting is the Bible warns about this in the New Testament, especially and repeatedly, about worldly wealth and what happens when you start pursuing those things. And we did. And we just went off on that particular route. Western civilization as a whole, we prospered greatly following boring old capitalism and Protestantism. Those 2 forces were the greatest forces on earth for getting people out of poverty. I mean, they did amazing things. It started in both Great Britain and in Holland. The Dutch and the British really are the ones who got the ball rolling on this. And when that ball started rolling, it started rolling really fast and really hard. The Scandinavians jumped on board, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Danes, then the Germans. And it's like, oh my goodness. I mean, no end to technology, no end to advances. And then, like I said, it all comes to the head in the 1960s. Now, we're not talking about the Catholics here, but they have a role to play too. The Catholics did not come off too well after World War II. They just didn't. Their lands and their countries in Europe got smoked. You know, Italy was primarily Catholic. Germany had a lot of Catholic in it. France, of course, almost entirely Catholic. Those nations were devastated by the war. And of course, a lot of Eastern European nations, especially Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, you know, back when they were called Czechoslovakia, devastated. Orthodox countries, devastated. Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, just devastated. Old school liturgical Christianity got smoked in World War II. Absolutely smoked. You know, they lived to see another day in the United States and South America, but here, outside of here, they didn't do too well. So the Europeans were seeing their own churches being hollowed out by the wealth and prosperity brought about by the end of World War II. And one of the people who saw it more clearly than others was a guy named Ratzinger, later to be known as Pope Benedict XVI. In the 50s, he was going and seeing how his own Catholic Church was being hollowed out on the inside by people who would go to Mass as regularly as can be, and that Mass attendance didn't mean a darn thing in how they lived their lives. It was just something to do. You know, I'm going to go out drinking, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to go to work. It's just one more thing on the agenda. Did all Catholics feel and see that way? No, but a lot of them did. And that's still true to this day, unfortunately. I won't go into all the Catholic YouTubers out there who will testify to that, but there's quite a few, and they know that that's still an issue to this day. They tried to implement something called Vatican II to fix that. They knew it was happening. They knew things were going in the wrong direction. We go, we got to fix this. Let's call everyone together in the Vatican. We'll change the rules. We'll change the regulations. We'll write some new documents, and everything will be good. They go ahead. They do it. They implement it. Lots of fanfare. Everybody was happy. And the numbers in the Catholic Church in terms of church attendance and people being a Catholic started dropping like a rock. It was a complete and total failure. 60 years after, it's like, my gosh, that was about the stupidest thing you could have ever done. When does that take place? I think, if I remember correctly, it's about 65 to 67 in that time frame. And they started rolling out the implementations of it in 70. And it was just a disaster in terms of getting people to deepen their faith. Not 100%, not across the board, but for a lot of reasons, it just didn't work out because they had to throw out a lot of their traditions and things they've been doing for hundreds of years in order to make this new thing work. And people were having cognitive dissonance with it. So that's one thing that caused it. Another thing, like I said, was wealth. Another thing, a piece of technology that was really had a huge impact was the introduction of the thing we call the pill, where now women could have sex and not get pregnant. Huge, huge impact. I mean, and so there's all these things all rolling up in terms of things going on. Of course, we have the first mainframe computers. Computers were still big in that day and age, but their impact was being felt in a huge way, especially with the space program. But businesses were buying them up like crazy to run their accounting and finance departments. So we are getting into the very first areas of electronic communication and electronic data processing. TVs and radios are becoming ever more popular. Stereo systems are becoming more sophisticated. Everything is getting more and more interesting. And we start falling away because we have all these shiny new toys to play with. And we're like, oh boy, well, we have all this now. What do we need church for? I mean, medical science and technology will solve all of our problems, and all we need is free love. And now that we have the pill, we can have free love. Women can have as many sexual partners as they want without consequence. So you have the Summer of Love in 67, which really, it's funny because it wasn't that big nationwide. It took place mostly in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco and Golden Gate Park, also right outside of San Francisco. But that's where the idea of blatant sexual immorality really took hold, including homosexuality, everything that we're dealing with now. It started then. Total sexual liberation. No more Christian morality holding us back. We're going to do what we want. We're going to sleep with who we want. And of course, it was all expressed under the umbrella of love. It's all free love, 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 love. And what it really was is basic hedonism, of course. But when you're having to be restrained by all these Protestant and Catholic traditions, it's like, oh, how freeing. Music was a big part of it too back in those days. Radios and TV broadcasting the latest rock and roll and whatnot, which of course was also promoting drug use, hedonism, sexual adventurism, so on and so forth. And it's almost as if a light switch went off. But perhaps one of the biggest things that happened during the 1960s is a tiny little event in this itsy bitsy tiny little country called Israel, where they had a war that lasted a mere 6 days with Jordan, Syria, and Egypt, where the Israelis just kicked their butts. I mean, it was so one-sided. They just devastated their neighbors. And the reason why they did that is because their neighbors were getting ready to attack them. They were broadcasting it loudly and openly, getting their armies together, and Israel decided, let's not wait, let's strike first. Well, during that time, when this has all happened during the month of June of 67, right while the Summer of Love was happening in San Francisco, June 7th, 1967, 6767 for you Zoomers out there. Want to talk about 67? How about 6767? The Israeli army walks into Jerusalem, which that city was given to the Palestinians. That was not part of the original Israeli mandate at all. But the Jordanians, seeing how the Israelis were kicking butt, took their forces out of Jerusalem, sent them back to Jordan because they didn't want them cut off and slaughtered by the Jews. And so for the first time in 1,900 years, Jerusalem is now ruled once again by Jews. The last time they ruled Jerusalem was 70 AD.
Well, that is time, and I think that's an interesting place to land. So let me ask you one final question. I've been talking to lots of different people about lots of different aspects of technology. And it's interesting to hear you point to the decade of the 60s as a influential decade. What is it about the 60s? I mean, you hit on this a little bit, but when it comes to, because like I have many more conversations planned. I mean, I might spend another year talking to strangers on the internet about technology because it is so wild and it is so in front of us in so many different ways. What should I be on the lookout for as I continue my quest?
Interesting. Here it is in a nutshell. What has been going on? And the city lights and Thomas Alva Edison and the electric lights is where this begins, is what happens with technology, and specifically electronic technology, is the more time and the more energy that we put into this is time we do not spend out in the forest, out on the lake, out in the cornfields, out in nature, just being outside, period. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone, even though I know this full well. What is going on with technology? And Heidegger is pointing at this in his famous essay on it, is technology is the constant and I will say purposeful intention to separate us from nature herself. When you have a cosmology where you understand that literally all of nature, squirrels, birds, trees, grass, is all a gift of God, and in a way, all those things express God's nature to us, and you put yourself into an artificial room built by man, lit by man, where everything around you is all stuff built by man, well, there goes nature. Nature is like some imaginary realm that maybe we'll take a vacation someday and go see Yellowstone, and that will be our touch with nature. Otherwise, we're constantly in artificial environments. Computers have made those artificial environments more interesting and more exciting than anything that's outside in our backyards. And hence, as we keep on getting sucked in with that, and AI will definitely play a role to be sure, we are going to lose connection with nature. And when you lose connection with nature, you lose connection with God. It's no more complicated than that.